The store was quiet, too quiet. Glass shelves gleamed like they'd never been touched. Designer handbags floated in illuminated boxes like trophies. Gentle jazz trickled from invisible speakers, echoing across the boutique's marble floor. And then the silence cracked. Not loudly, but just enough. A cough, a shuffle. An old man stood near the fitting room, holding a jacket in both hands. His clothes were worn thin, his trousers slightly too short, his shoes scratched at the toes. But his hands were steady, respectful. He wasn't trying to steal. He just wanted to try on a blazer. A navy blue blazer with a subtle charcoal stripe, clean, quiet, dignified. He'd been coming in for weeks, never causing trouble, just looking. Today he reached. Today he touched. And that's when it began. A voice, sharp as a broken zipper, sliced through the calm. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to put that down." He turned, startled. A tall woman in red heels and even redder lipstick strutted over. Her name tag read Morgan, assistant floor manager. "You can't try that on," she said flatly. The man blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought—" She cut him off. "That piece is reserved for clients," she said with exaggerated precision. "And you clearly are not a client." The man glanced around. The store was nearly empty. "I'm not hurting anything," he said gently. "I just want to see how it felt." For a minute, Morgan crossed her arms. "Do you even know how much that costs?" He didn't reply. Another salesperson nearby snickered. A third one pulled out her phone, not to call security, to record. The old man lowered the blazer back on the hanger, as if it were made of porcelain. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." A rustle at the front door went unnoticed. A man in a black hoodie and jeans stepped quietly into the store, glancing around. He wore no brand names, no watch, no flash. He looked like a tourist, except he wasn't. He saw the blazer. He saw the old man. And he saw everything. He said nothing. Not yet. But Keanu Reeves had just entered the boutique. And Justice, quiet, steady, unmistakable, was now in the room. Morgan turned to a younger sales associate standing beside her, tall, fresh-faced, trying too hard in a crisp black suit. "This happens more often than you think," she said, loud enough for the man to hear. "They come in, pretend they're shopping, just looking for attention." The young associate, Tyler, chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to join in or walk away. So he said nothing. The old man didn't speak either. He nodded slightly, gently placed the blazer back on the rack, and stepped back, folding his hands like a schoolboy who'd been scolded in front of the class. Morgan smirked. "Maybe check the outlet stores next time. Might find something closer to your bracket." Her words dripped with the kind of sarcasm that only comes from people who think their job title makes them superior. A few feet away, a couple browsing leather bags turned and watched with raised brows. One whispered to the other, "Why is she talking to him like that?" At the front of the store, the man in the black hoodie slowly approached the clothing racks. Keanu Reeves kept his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed, head tilted just slightly as he listened. He didn't interrupt. Not yet, but he watched with eyes that saw through performance, through vanity, through cruelty. Morgan finally waved a hand dismissively toward the old man. "All right, sir. Unless you plan on buying something, which, no offense, looks unlikely, please make room for real customers." The old man nodded slowly and turned to leave. His back curved slightly as he moved, the weight of invisible things pushing him down, shame, maybe, or simply exhaustion from being reminded that no matter how respectfully you act, someone will still measure your worth by the shine of your shoes. And that's when Keanu spoke. Not loudly, not angrily, just clearly. "Excuse me." Morgan turned. Keanu stood at the edge of the suit section now, eyes calm, one hand resting lightly on the blazer the old man had just been forced to abandon. "Was there a reason you stopped that man from trying this on?" he asked, his voice smooth and low, like velvet covering a blade. Morgan blinked. She didn't recognize him yet. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, switching to her customer voice. "That jacket is a high-ticket item, and we've had some issues with people who aren't serious buyers." Keanu raised one brow. Did he damage it? No, of course not, but did he raise his voice? Morgan hesitated. No. Was he rude? No. Keanu nodded, gently taking the blazer off the rack. Then it sounded like he was more polite than most shoppers I've seen today. Morgan's smile faltered. Behind her, Tyler started to realize who he was looking at. Tyler squinted, his eyes darting between Keanu and the jacket in his hands. Then it clicked. His mouth parted slightly. He leaned toward Morgan and whispered, "That's Keanu Reeves." Morgan didn't react at first. She just blinked, then turned slowly, taking in his calm stance. The familiar face, one that somehow looked exactly like the photos and nothing like them at all. And suddenly, everything in her shifted. "Oh, Mr. Reeves," she began. But Keanu raised a hand gently, stopping her apology before it started. "I'm not here to make a scene," he said, placing the blazer over his arm. "I was just curious why respect in this store seems to come with a price tag." Morgan straightened her posture, switching tones like a dial. "We deeply apologize, sir. We had no idea." He tilted his head again. "You had no idea what?" "That he," she caught herself. "That he didn't belong." A long pause. Keanu looked at her, without blinking. "I think he belonged here more than most of us." Meanwhile, the old man had stopped near the exit. He hadn't heard what Keanu said, not all of it, but something had changed in the air. Customers were whispering. The store felt heavier. He glanced over his shoulder and saw Keanu Reeves holding the jacket, not angrily, just holding it like it still meant something, like it could mean something again. Morgan, now desperate to course correct, turned to the old man. "Sir, I believe you're welcome to try that piece on now. I'd be happy to help you." He looked at her, not unkindly, just tired. "No, thank you," he said softly. "I wouldn't want to inconvenience anyone." And with that, he turned back toward the door. But this time, Keanu stepped forward. "Sir," he said, voice steady, respectful. "May I—" The old man paused. Keanu extended the blazer, the one he had taken off the rack, and held it out gently. "I think it would look great on you." The store was silent again. But this time, it wasn't cruel. It was reverent. Tyler stepped forward, eyes wide. I can open the fitting room," he said quietly. The old man looked at Keanu, and for the first time all day, he smiled. Across the marble floor, Daniel, the nervous junior waiter, was frozen in place, his eyes wide as he watched the man in the scuffed boots and hoodie quietly take a seat in the far corner. There was something different now, not in how Keanu Reeves moved. His steps were still slow, deliberate, but in the way he looked at Marcus. Calm, centered, but behind his eyes, a fire had been lit. He sat down, folded his hands on the table, and simply waited. Marcus tried to shake it off. He wasn't about to be intimidated by some drifter with a good jawline. "Fine," he muttered. "He wants a seat? Let him sit. Just wait till he sees the prices." But what Marcus didn't notice was the reaction building among the diners. A couple at a nearby table whispered to each other. A young man pulled out his phone, eyebrows lifting in recognition. A little girl, dining with her parents, stared with wide eyes, because someone had just realized who was sitting quietly at table 7. It wasn't just some guy. It was Keanu Reeves. The name hadn't been said aloud yet, but like sparks catching dry brush, the realization began to spread. Still, Keanu said nothing. He didn't need to. Marcus returned to the kitchen, still smirking, but it was thinner now. His swagger, a little less secure. He grabbed a tablet from the prep counter, pretended to check orders, but really sneaking glances toward the dining room. That guy, that whatever his name is, something about him felt off. Not dangerous, just too still, too certain. Meanwhile, Keanu sat quietly at his table, his fingers resting lightly on the edge of the menu, though he hadn't opened it. Across the room, Daniel, the youngest waiter, stepped toward him with careful steps. Can I get you something to drink, sir?" he asked. Keanu looked up, and Daniel flinched, not from fear, but because of how deeply he felt seen, as if the man in front of him wasn't just looking at him, but through him all the way down to his spine. Keanu smiled gently. "Water's fine. Thank you." Daniel nodded and rushed off, flustered, but with a strange warmth in his chest. That simple thank you meant more than all of Marcus's barking ever had. In the corner, a woman in a tailored pantsuit leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Is that who I think it is?" Her husband nodded slowly. "Yep, Keanu Reeves. No doubt." At another table, a man Googled Keanu low-profile hoodie restaurant and whispered, "It's him. Look at the hands." Someone else began filming discreetly, but Keanu didn't shift. He just watched, not to be noticed, not to be admired, but to observe what power does when it thinks it's safe. Back in the kitchen, Dana, the assistant manager, entered, tablet in hand, irritation already simmering. "Marcus," she snapped. "Table 7 just ordered water. That's it." So, he's sitting in a $250 chair, blocking the most visible spot in the room, and he's not buying anything. Marcus scoffed. "Yeah, well, maybe he should go back to wherever he borrowed that jacket from." Dana narrowed her eyes. "You didn't say anything rude, did you?" "Oof. I was polite," Marcus lied, brushing crumbs from his apron. As always, he hadn't noticed that Daniel had been standing in the doorway the whole time, listening, or that Keanu had just taken a folded receipt from his jacket and written something quietly on the back, something that would, within the hour, make its way into hands that needed to see it. It was the kind of thing that could have been missed. Just a small, folded receipt, placed carefully on the hostess counter beside the reservation book. But Chloe, the hostess, noticed it. She always noticed things. It's how she survived working under Marcus for the past 9 months. She opened it slowly. Inside, written in clean, deliberate handwriting, were just 6 words. Leadership isn't volume. It's vision. K. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked across the restaurant. Keanu hadn't moved. He was still sitting quietly, water untouched, eyes scanning the room, not in judgment, but in awareness. Chloe looked at Marcus, who was now arguing with the sommelier over who forgot to greet a table of influencers. She folded the note again, slid it into her pocket, and smiled to herself. Back in the kitchen, Daniel wiped his hands nervously, staring at the door like he was debating something. Dana passed by. "You okay?" He hesitated, then blurted, "I think Marcus insulted that guy. Table 7. She froze. "The one in the hoodie?" Daniel nodded. She sighed and ran a hand through her tightly pinned hair. Of course he did. Meanwhile, Marcus re-entered the dining area, now armed with charm. He spotted Keanu still sitting, still silent, and forced a laugh as he approached. "Apologies, sir," he said, voice syrupy. "Didn't mean to come off short earlier. We're just very protective of our dress code." Keanu looked up slowly. "I noticed," he said. Marcus chuckled awkwardly. "Well, you know how it is. High standards. High profile. That's what keeps places like this on the map." Keanu tilted his head just slightly. "I always thought kindness looked better on a map." That shut Marcus up for a second. Then Keanu added, "You might want to be careful about where your standards stop and where your values should start." Marcus forced a grin, eyes darting nervously now. For the first time that day, he felt small and somehow seen. At the counter, Chloe leaned over to Dana and whispered, "You know who he is, right?" Dana nodded, her face pale. "Oh, I know exactly who he is." The restaurant hummed with hushed tension. It wasn't chaos, not yet, but the energy had shifted. The kind of shift that happens before the truth walks in wearing a name tag. Chloe still had the folded note in her pocket. Every time she touched it, it grounded her. She looked at Marcus differently now, and she wasn't the only one. Daniel had stopped avoiding eye contact. And even Dana, always quick to defend the brand, was uncharacteristically quiet at the POS terminal, scrolling something on her phone. A customer's Instagram story had just gone live. It showed a short video. Keanu Reeves, sitting quietly. The caption, "This man just got disrespected by a waiter. You won't believe what happens next." The views were already climbing. At table 7, Keanu finally reached for the water and took a slow sip. He wasn't here for a show. He wasn't waiting for applause, but he was waiting to see what kind of people these were, what they would do when they thought he was watching. Back in the kitchen, Marcus was pacing. He'd felt the change, too. The way the staff had gotten quieter. How Chloe barely looked at him. How Daniel didn't rush to agree anymore. And worst of all, Keanu hadn't said a single cruel word. He'd just been there, watching. That's when Dana approached the counter. "Marcus," she said flatly, "my office. Now." He opened his mouth. "Is this about that guy?" "I didn't." Her voice was quieter than usual, but sharper. "I know exactly what you did. You can talk in there." Marcus hesitated, then stormed off, grumbling. "Oh, so now he owns a place?" As he passed Keanu, their eyes met again. Keanu didn't blink, and in that look there was no rage, no satisfaction, just a single, echoing question behind his gaze. "Are you proud of who you are when no one's cheering?" In the silence that followed, a sound broke through. Soft. Sure. Applause. Not for Keanu. Not for any celebrity. But from a woman in the back corner who had watched the entire thing. She stood. "I don't know who that man is to you," she said, "but he's the only one in this place who made me want to come back." And just like that, the dominoes began to fall. Marcus sat slumped in Dana's office chair, arms crossed like a child who'd just been told recess was over. Across from him, Dana leaned on the edge of the desk, arms folded, phone in hand. "Do you know how many reposts that clip has?" she asked. Marcus rolled his eyes. "People post everything. It'll die in a day." Dana didn't flinch. "You mocked a guest. A quiet guest. One who, by the way, just so happens to be a global icon of humility and grace." "Oh, please," Marcus scoffed. "He came in dressed like a janitor. I was protecting the vibe." Dana leaned forward. "No," she said sharply. "You were protecting your ego and wrecking ours." Outside the office, the restaurant was no longer frozen. It had thawed into a strange kind of awareness, the kind that comes when people realize they've been part of something, even if only by silence. Chloe had passed the note to Daniel. He read it twice and said nothing, just folded it gently and placed it in his apron like it was more valuable than tips. Meanwhile, Keanu stood up. He didn't make an announcement. He didn't wave. He just walked over to the quietest person in the room, the dishwasher, a stocky man in his 50s named Jorge. He'd been working the back of house for over a decade. Nobody ever asked him anything except how fast he could clear a tray. Keanu stepped beside him and said, "I like the rhythm you keep." Jorge blinked. "Sir, the way you handle the plates. I've worked a few kitchens. You've got a good rhythm." Jorge gave a small, stunned nod. "Thank you." Keanu tilted his head. "Has anyone ever asked you what you'd change about this place?" Jorge looked away, as if the question were too large to fit in the space. "No," he said. "Never." Keanu smiled. "Would you tell me?" At that exact moment, Dana stepped out of the office. Marcus was gone. He hadn't been fired, but he wasn't coming back. And nobody rushed to stop him. They gathered slowly, not because anyone told them to, but because something in the air said now was the time. Keanu didn't stand on a table. He didn't clap for attention. He simply moved a few chairs together near the service station, sat down with Jorge and Daniel, and began asking quiet questions. And people came. Chloe, Diego from prep, Lana from pastry, even a bartender from a night shift who was off duty but had heard. Each one found themselves leaning in as Keanu did something that hadn't been done in months, maybe years. He listened. Jorge spoke first, nervous at first, but steadier with every sentence. "We don't want a reward," he said. "We just want to matter, to be asked, to not be invisible." Daniel added, "When Marcus would yell at us, no one said anything. We were scared of losing ours." Chloe nodded. "Some of us did lose ours, if we disagreed with him." Keanu sat silently, not judging, just absorbing. At one point, someone asked, "Are you buying a place?" He smiled. "No, but you could," Daniel said. "I don't need to buy a building to help fix the foundation," Keanu replied. Meanwhile, Dana stood just behind the espresso machine, watching the entire thing unfold. Her arms were crossed, but her defenses had lowered. No clipboard, no tablet, just her. She stepped forward. Everyone quieted. She looked at them, really looked, and then she surprised them all. "Do you want to sit down?" They nodded. She did. And for the first time in far too long, they spoke as people, not as roles, not as ranks, just humans. Out front, a table of regulars watched through glass and whispered, "What are they doing?" Another answered, "I think they're remembering how to be a team." Later that night, after the last table had left and the chairs were flipped onto tabletops, the restaurant was quiet again, but not the kind of silence that feels cold or tense. This one felt earned, like the deep breath after a storm finally passes. Jorge stood near the dish pit, drying his hands when Chloe walked up beside him, holding a folded piece of paper. "Keanu left this for you," she said. Jorge looked surprised. "For me?" She nodded. He opened it carefully. A single sheet of off-white stationery, with writing as calm and deliberate as the man who just left hours earlier. "Your strength is quiet, but unshakable. Don't let them confuse silence with absence. The people who keep things running are often the last to be thanked, and the first to be forgotten. You are not forgotten. Keep the rhythm." "K." Jorge swallowed hard, blinking too many times. He folded the letter and slipped it into his wallet, behind an old photo of his daughter. The next morning, Chloe arrived early and placed a small whiteboard near the entrance. She wrote, in bold dry erase ink, "The loudest one isn't always a leader." Underneath, someone had already added, "The kindest one usually is." By noon, someone else had taped a printed photo beneath it, a blurry candid of Keanu, seated at table 7, hands folded, eyes watching. There was no name, no caption, no explanation, just an energy. Then, something strange happened. A food blog picked up the story, not because Keanu had made a scene, but because he hadn't. They called it, "The Day a Celebrity Walked In and Made a Team Out of Strangers." And in the comments, under dozens of articles and reposted photos, one line began to appear again and again. "Be more like Table 7. Jorge showed up the next day wearing a fresh apron. Not because anyone told him to, just because it felt right. Chloe rearranged the hostess schedule, giving weekend priority to those who always volunteer for the closing shift. Daniel? He started checking in on the kitchen staff before every lunch rush. Not because it was his job, but because he finally realized it should have been all along. Dana changed too. Not overnight, but visibly. The clipboard didn't vanish, but it started to appear after conversations, not before them. One afternoon, she sat beside Jorge in the break room and asked about his daughter. He looked confused at first, then surprised, then grateful. It was the first time she'd asked. A week later, a delivery guy accidentally knocked over a tray of plated desserts. In the past, someone might have rolled their eyes, called it rookie hour. Instead, Daniel helped him clean it. Diego remade the orders, and Chloe brought the delivery guy a glass of water and said, "Happens to the best of us." It was the first time he smiled during a shift. At the far end of the kitchen wall, someone taped a photo. It was printed in black and white, slightly grainy. Keanu Reeves, seated at table 7, not posing, not smiling, just watching. Underneath it, in thick marker, someone had written, "We'd be proud of this shift." No one had to ask who he was. They all knew. That night, Dana called Jorge into her office. He wiped his hands on his apron, nervous. She smiled for real this time. "We're starting a staff mentorship program," she said. "Cross-department. I want you to run it." Jorge stared. "You mean like supervise?" "No," Dana said. "Lead." He blinked. "Why me?" "Because," she said, "you're already doing it." The plaque appeared quietly one morning, brushed metal, mounted just above table 7. No fanfare, no press release, just 5 simple words engraved beneath the tabletop. Kindness sat here. Table 7. Customers noticed. Some asked, Staff smiled and said, "It's reserved for those who lead with heart." Weeks passed, but the story didn't fade. The post went viral, sure, but it was the comments that mattered most. This reminds me to slow down with my father. I used to work in service. I cried reading this. We need more Table 7S in the world. And somewhere far from the noise, in a small house tucked behind trees, Keanu sat on a worn couch with a mug of tea, flipping through a hand-addressed envelope. No fan mail, no autographs, just a note, typed, thoughtful, signed by hand. "Dear Mr. Reeves, we don't know how to thank you for what you didn't do loudly. You didn't scold. You didn't shame. You just showed us what decency looks like when no one expects it. The restaurant is different now, not because we changed everything overnight, but because we started asking better questions, listening more, watching ourselves the way you did. We hope you visit again. The blazer you picked for Jorge's retirement party looked great, by the way. And yes, Table 7 will always be yours. With gratitude, the staff." Keanu leaned back, closed his eyes, and smiled, not because he'd been recognized, but because something real had rooted itself in a place that used to pretend. And all it took was sitting down. Clapperboard the end. Green circle, thanks for watching. Speech balloon, leave a comment. What moment in this story stuck with you the most? Would you have done what Keanu did, or something different? Pushpin, your voice matters. Your kindness echoes.